West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Let's bring in former CIA caseworker, Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. She sits on that committee that you saw there and joins us now. Congresswoman, good morning. Did we get any answers yesterday? You were there in the hearing. I know you had questions. We'll get into that. There was obviously a lot of grandstanding, more lectures than questions than what we saw right there. Did you get any satisfactory answers yesterday from the Secretary?
So yesterday for me was the start of the conversation. I think what you depicted in the part where the clips we just saw was a lot of the grandstanding, frankly, not an effort to get answers, just media clips. But we did have, from Democrats and Republicans, thoughtful, detailed questions. You know, and frankly, we're looking at what's happened within the past 6 weeks, what's happened since the beginning of the year when the administration came into the presidency. And we've been looking at the last 20 years. So yesterday was, I think, a first step forward in what I hope will be many more hearings as we conduct congressional oversight. Certainly one day's conversation about our 20-year war and the challenging departure from Afghanistan will certainly not be sufficient.
Your district is home to Fort Pickett, which currently houses about 5,000, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, 5,000 Afghan men, women, and children who are evacuated from that country. How many more people do you sense are still in Afghanistan who would like to come out and arrive somewhere like Fort Pickett? We know there are a handful of Americans left. We need to get a better number on that. But also Afghans, wartime allies, people who worked with us, or people, frankly, just scared to live alongside the Taliban?
Well, so throughout the world, we still have individuals at different lily pad locations who are waiting to go through the process to file for their SIV or confirm their SIV paperwork or their P2 eligibility. From their perspective, ideally move on to the United States. There's also endangered Afghans who made it out of the country who are potentially going to be processed for relocation in other countries, not just the United States. Certainly other allies throughout the world have offered to take endangered Afghans. And I do know that there continue to be folks on the ground in Afghanistan who worked in concert with, right side by side with American service members and American organizations, NGOs, and they continue. Some of them continue to be in very, very grave danger.
Congresswoman, I listened to your questioning yesterday, and you asked the Secretary specifically about videos that you've seen and received, testimony that you've seen and received about the condition of certain women in Afghanistan, women who might have been singled out for assassination and discrimination, etc. How much leverage do you think the U.S. still has practically, and how much political capital is it prepared to expend in order to try and ensure that women's rights are protected in Afghanistan? Because, frankly, the early signs aren't good, right? Women are being told they have to stay home, they can't work alongside men, they can't get into taxis with men, and some are being treated far worse than that. So what do you think the US can do and is prepared to do now?
So I think this is a bit of a moving target. I think, and this was the crux of my question, I was concerned by some of the testimony of the secretary and others from the administration that are still kind of giving the benefit of the doubt to the Taliban. And my question really was based on, is it appropriate to still give them the benefit of the doubt? And if not, how do we move forward? How do we advocate for the rights of women in Afghanistan? How do we protect those who entered schools and entered university and set about being part of their government because we were there as a stabilizing factor and advocating for them to do that? And so I think at this point in time, it will be incumbent upon the United States to work diligently with our partner nations, both with our NATO allies and regional partners, to continue that advocacy. But I think first and foremost, we have to be eyes wide open about the reality on the ground, which is why I asked the secretary if he has seen these disturbing videos and photos and accounts of what's happening in Afghanistan currently.
Congresswoman, I want to talk about a couple things. But first, I want to discuss the insults, the shouting, those petulantly insulting him, saying everything he said was a lie, and then petulantly demanding that the Secretary of State not respond. I'm just shocked at the lack of decorum, the lack of respect for the institution of Congress, the lack of respect for the institution of state. And instead of getting to the facts, you had a lot of people that were just sort of verbally prancing around and posing for the cameras. I'm just shocked. Does that happen a lot in your committees? Because I can tell you, we impeached Bill Clinton. We nailed his people to the wall rhetorically, but we always were respectful of the Armed Services Committee. Our chairman demanded it of us.
The challenge here is, some of the antics that you saw yesterday in the Blinken hearing are part and parcel of, there's a few folks on that committee. They're there for the antics. I have children, as you see in this picture, and sometimes you just have to, I could go back home if I wanted to listen to someone being a petulant child. Although my children, let's be clear, do not behave like that. It's preening for the camera. It's not respecting the constitutional duty of oversight. If we're supposed to be asking questions, and there's in fact a assertion that you don't even want to hear an answer, then it's a 5-minute speech. You can do that elsewhere. The secretary's time is valuable. Our time is valuable. And the American people's time is valuable, and we want answers. There are many questions that I still need answered from the secretary, from this administration. And frankly, because it's about looking backwards, what happened in the past, it's also about helping to ensure that we're moving forward. I will say one of the most spectacular questions that we heard during the hearing came from my colleague, Congressman Castro of Texas, who remarked on the fact that in the 9/11 Commission review, that one of the findings was that there were so many State Department officials who were not in confirmed positions. So many Bush administration officials hadn't actually received Senate confirmation. And Congressman Castro's comment was this was a learning of something that went wrong back in 2001. And here we are with about half of the numbers of confirmed State Department officials compared to where we were in 2001, because we have one senator who's standing in the way of confirmation of these, an array of undersecretaries who are vital to being able to move forward on the mission related to things that Katie was talking about, such as ensuring that we can work with our regional partners to advocate for women and girls, ensuring that the departments handling Afghanistan and our regional equities are well staffed. And so these are the sorts of things that we're supposed to bring forward in these hearings. And some people did it very, very effectively. And some people were there just for the clicks and I don't know, the celebrity of it, which is not the job. That is not the duty.
It is Wednesday, the 15th of September of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, a lovely velvety hollandaise sauce on an equally lovely, well, a little bit runny and fluffy egg dish for your culinary pleasure, while at the same time having the double entendre of, will no one rid us of these priests? And who are they? I guess Cassie Hunt thinks they're the elites who keep winning. Do we keep winning? I guess we just won't lose. We just won't stop trying to be defeated. Well, we try to be defeated. We are Democrats, after all. But it looks like California will remain part of the classical America, not the new America that apparently seems to be arising in front of our very eyes. Where'd that come from? Well, it came from the right of us, so far right, we weren't able to see it until it was right on top of us. Some of us have very good eyesight, or maybe we had binoculars, telescopes. We saw what was coming, and we tried. We really tried to tell people, and people just said, you're being alarmist. Keep the filibuster. How many times have we heard that before? Okay, well, in California, looks like Gavin Newsom gets to remain governor, and the Nazis are held at bay. And why do I call them Nazis? Well, mostly because the Nazis learned how to be Nazis by studying American white supremacists. Okay, just saying. Oh, Larry Elder is black, you say. How can they be considered to be white supremacists, please? Do they respect our form of government at all? Okay. I mean, look what they did to the referendum process in California to get, well, this recall going, 12%. Now, my proposal is that now, every time you have a recall, whatever margin of victory there is, or defeat, that's what you have to get the next time you want a recall. Gavin Newsom, it looks like, won by 66%. So that means that signature gatherers have to gather 66% of the, elected, or of the registered voters in California. And then you can have your recall. Maybe I might add also you have to pay 66 times what it cost to file a recall. Just saying. They can charge tens of thousands of dollars for a FOIA request in Merced. They do. Then, maybe they should charge a little bit more to, have a recall. Especially so soon after an election and so soon before an election. Think of that. They're going to give us election fatigue. They're going to gish gallop us on the election fatigue. So when the elections that really do matter come up, we'll be so tired of voting. We don't want to vote. We don't want to participate in our government. They think that everybody thinks like them. All right? We have to keep remembering that. They think everybody's a crook because they are crooks. They think that everything is transactional because they are transactional. So at what point do you stop appeasing that, enabling it? What do you do? Grounding? Take the allowance away? tough love. Well, they are choices, and I guess we have to vote on them, won't we? Because that is what is in the DNA of a true American. And let us not forget it, lest we fall by the wayside in the dustbin of history. Okay, we've strung enough cliches along this morning. I suppose we should look at what we have in store for you today. We have curated quite a menu. Once again, we do it every day. And try to stick to a theme of sorts. Anyway, at the top, yes, I cannot believe how brazen these GOP Nazis are. And once again, why do I call them Nazis? Because, I don't know, it rolls off the tongue. And it truly is what they are. Please. But the way that they treated Antony Blinken, as if Joe Biden and Antony Blinken himself are responsible for the quagmire of 20 years in Afghanistan. As if. Please. If they want to rehabilitate G.W. Bush, that's fine. But you know what? It should be from if he's going to paint by number watercolor pictures of dogs or whatever, it should be from a jail cell. Okay? If they want to rehabilitate him, make him the dog man from Alcatraz or something. Come on. Bark, bark. Anyway, these gaslighting Nazis are starting to get on my nerves. And I think California is shall we say, a message. And that's why people like Cassie Hunt don't like it, because they don't like that message. Yeah, we'll talk about that someday. Well, we will. I have been on social media. Check it out. Anyway, as we continue on the rest of the menu here, as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, a county judge has suspended Minnesota's tougher standards on when police can use deadly force. Oh, we have to study whether we should be doing this. Even though, you want a consent decree? You'll get one, county judge. But anyway, I guess we could go on while we're inside that story, but still, they're going to allow them to use the deadlier force until they can figure out what the hell is going on. Well, that's one way to do it. I would suspend the deadly force, but that's just me. I'm a romantic. As we continue, dozens of American Indian tribes asked the Biden administration to immediately enact emergency protections for gray wolves. Because apparently there are a few states, and we know who they are, the usual suspect states, who have decided just to, decimate all wolves because they can. And 3 former U.S. intel operatives admitted to hacking American journalists, human rights activists, and rival governments for the United Arab Emirates. And I hate to tell you this, but they're not in jail. What? After the break, we then moved to the chef's table where Vladimir Putin entered self-isolation after people in his inner circle became infected with the coronavirus. Now, not part of that article, I have been hearing, and I should due diligence here and actually dig in to see if the veracity of these reports of what I am hearing, and not just me, but others as well, if the veracity of it is correct. But I've been hearing that there are daily totals of infected that are bouncing around 100,000 in Russia. Interesting. Anyway, They say he's tested negative, but why wouldn't they? He's KGB. Come on. And Greek authorities have opened an investigation into the plane crash that killed a prosecution witness in the corruption trial of former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Oh, some Lakari intrigue. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and if you push that link, that takes you into the chat room. And the chat room is monitored. Yes, monitored. It is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And thank you, Kelly, for doing so, and so much more. Thank you. If you out there in radio listening land would then look across, and I guess look, you know how do you do that in radio? Well, because this is a multimedia broadcast, and yes, there's a homepage at netrootsradio.com, by the way. And if you're on there, there's a player right there at the top, and you can click on that, and that's our live player. And so you can follow along of sorts, but near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, across the page to the left, from the chat room link, is the link to the Patreon page that we have. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford, you know, about the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink. It seems like the common currency these days in the appeals to help us pay our bills. How do you like that? Anyway, if you could afford such currency and send it our way once a month, it truly does help us pay our bills. And we have some pretty good scientific experience in how to stretch dollars beyond compare. And we've been doing it for quite some time, and we've only been able to do so because of generosity of folks like you. And folks just as you. Because there have been some long-time listeners. Thank you. Anyway, it helps us, well, pay our bills, as I say, and they keep increasing. I know. Everything goes up, nothing comes down. And so with your help, we're able to pay these increasing costs. And if they didn't keep increasing, we probably wouldn't keep making these entreaties. But they do, and so do we. And we are right now, once again, appealing for funds. Because bills are one thing, machinery is another. Yes, it's just not the broadcast machines and the research machines. It's all the other little infrastructure, sound balancing, software, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, that keeps this little powerhouse of resistance resisting the Nazi, yes, and I'm not making hyperbole here, the Nazi takeover of the United States of America. We will not allow it to happen. Jeez, this is America. But anyway, all kidding aside, we do thank you for your generosity and considering any such generosity in the future. All righty. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple because Tom made it simple. You go to @Netroots Radio. Jeez. And like I said, Tom made it simple and Tom takes care of it. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of me at Justice Putnam, and well, I should, because I'll tell you, if you follow me there, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. And the show notes and links, as I mentioned earlier, are a very integral and important part to this multimedia concern. The real reportage is there. Everything else is, I don't know, could be a joke. Could be. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West, because Tom didn't take care of that. I did. I know. Tried to make it simple, but I didn't. Darn it. Anyway, yeah, at Cookbook West. And also, please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Please. Okay, so let's tuck in. That's the nomenclature we've been using lately for this salon meme that we have going here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because it truly is. Let us tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. That's the nomenclature we're using now in this salon meme that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But staff from the Associated Press brings us this first offering. A judge has suspended Minnesota's new stricter standards on when police can use deadly force, halting a change in state law that followed the death of George Floyd while in custody of Minneapolis police. The new standards passed by the legislature in 2020 raised the bar on officers to justify, in specific terms, how their actions involving lethal force were necessary. The old standards were, I don't know. The person had excited delirium, and I had to kill him. I was afraid. Actually, that's too specific. They're just saying, was it excited delirium? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that's good enough. Okay, go ahead. Collect your pay. Take up a little vacation. We got to do some paperwork. Okay. So, the several law enforcement lobbying groups, of course, filed a legal challenge to get the law tossed out, or at least suspended until more officers could be trained on the new expectations. Ooh. In other words, they needed the cop union legal department to sit down with all the cops and say, this is how much you can say. Ramsey County Judge Leonardo Castro on Monday ruled that the changes to the law will be put on hold until the lawsuit is complete, and that the use of force conditions will revert to those that were in place before the new law went into effect in March. Castro said oral arguments will take place within 60 days, the Star Tribune reported. I looked into this guy, and I can't tell if he has any Federalist Society connections. Because I don't want to color somebody as being a Federalist Society judge. This seems a little, I don't know, overwrought. But he was a long-time public defender. So who knows? Maybe there's something in the law that he sees that is important to allow cops to continue choking people off on the curb with a knee to the throat until they're dead. Because, we have to figure out if this lawsuit has any merit. Okay. The 2020 law, or the 2020 law change, no longer allows officers to justify deadly force by claiming that they use such force to protect themselves or another person from apparent death or great bodily harm. The new law now reads, to protect the police officer or another from death or great bodily harm. Castro declined to grant Governor Tim Walz's motion to dismiss the case after the governor argued that the plaintiffs lacked standing to sue. The plaintiffs include the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and Law Enforcement Labor Services, Inc. Todd Richmond of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Dozens of American Indian tribes asked the Biden administration to immediately enact emergency protections for gray wolves, saying states have become too aggressive in hunting the animal. Groups representing the tribes sent a letter to Interior Secretary Deb Haaland asking her to act quickly on an emergency petition they filed in May to relist the wolf as endangered or threatened. They also asked Haaland, who the AP seems to want us to know is a member of the Laguna Pueblo in New Mexico and the first Native American to lead a cabinet agency to relist the wolf on an emergency basis for 240 days, ensuring immediate protection. The groups say that states have enacted anti-wolf policies that present a real potential of decimating wolf populations. The letter does not name any specific states or policies, but Izzy Baird, a spokeswoman for Relist Wolves Coalition, which has been working with tribal nations on the issue, noted in an email that Wisconsin hunters went over their kill quota of 119 by almost 100 animals during that state's spring season. Montana allows hunters to kill up to 10 wolves each and allows private payments for dead wolves reminiscent of bounties, and that an Idaho law passed just in July allows hunters to kill up to 90% of that state's wolf population. The letter notes that wolves play a key role in a host of American Indian tribes' cultures, and accuses the federal government of failing to listen to their concerns about removing the wolf from the endangered species list in January. In other words, freedom of religion for me, but not for thee. Had either the Trump or the Biden administration consulted tribal nations as treaty and trust responsibilities require, they would have heard that as a sacred creature, the wolf is an integral part of the land-based identity that shapes our communities, beliefs, customs, and traditions, the letter said. The land and all that it contains is our temple. Now, wolves across most of the contiguous U.S. were stripped of federal Endangered Species Act protections in the final days of the Trump administration. Wolves in the northern Rockies region, including Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, and portions of Washington State, Oregon, and Utah, lost protections a decade ago under former President Barack Obama. The groups include the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, the Association on American Indian Affairs, the Navajo Nation, the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin, the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council, the Native Justice Coalition, the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association, and the Intertribal Council of Arizona. Department of Interior spokesman Tyler Cherry declined comment on the letter. Joel Scheckman and Christopher Bing of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. 3 former U.S. intelligence operatives who worked as cyber spies for the United Arab Emirates admitted to violating U.S. hacking laws and prohibitions on selling sensitive military technology under a deal to avoid prosecution announced yesterday, Tuesday. The operatives, Mark Bayer, Ryan Adams, and Daniel Guricki, were part of a clandestine unit named Project Raven, first reported by Reuters, that helped the UAE spy on its enemies. Now, our first clue on these folks not being convicted for any of their crimes is that they don't have 3 names. There's no middle name for any of these scofflaw. They're spies. Back to the article. At the behest of the UAE's monarchy, the Project Raven team hacked into the accounts of human rights activists, journalists, and rival governments, Reuters reported. The 3 men admitted to hacking into computer networks in the U.S., and exporting sophisticated cyber intrusion tools without gaining required permission from the U.S. government, according to court papers released in U.S. federal court in Washington, D.C. yesterday, Tuesday. The operatives and their attorneys did not respond to requests for comment because they never do. The UAE Embassy in Washington, D.C. did not immediately respond to a request for comment because why would they? They have bone saws too, you know. As part of the deal with federal authorities to avoid prosecution, the 3 former intelligence officials agreed to pay a combined $1.69 million and never again seek a U.S. security clearance. As if we don't know, but they're going to tell us in this report, is a requirement for jobs that entail access to national security secrets. In other words, they pay a small fine. And what is this 1.69? Just say 1.70. God, I hate that. Anyway, they're not going to jail. Back to the article. Hackers for hire and those who otherwise support such activities in violation of U.S. law should fully expect to be prosecuted for their criminal conduct. Acting Assistant U.S. Attorney General Mark J. Lesko for the Justice Department's National Security Division said in a statement, and I'm like, well, why don't you then? A slap on the wrist? And they can go get a job at, I don't know, there's no Radio Shacks left, are there? Darn, I wish they could work there. Revelations of Project Raven in 2019 by Reuters highlighted the growing practice of former intel operatives selling their spycraft overseas with little oversight or accountability. This is a clear message to anybody, including former U.S. government employees who had considered using cyberspace to leverage export-controlled info for the benefit of a foreign government or a foreign commercial company. As Assistant Director Brian Von Dran of the FBI Cyber Division said in a statement, there is risk and there will be consequences. Yeah, you pay a small fine and you lose your security clearance. Big wow. The Reuters investigation found that Project Raven spied on numerous human rights activists, some of whom were later tortured by the UAE security forces because, as I said, they have bone saws too. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea, to the circles of your mind. A new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, skipping tropes. It's 1973 and Marvel Comics introduces Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. Made by all white guys, modeled on Bruce Lee, Shang-Chi is the rebel son of Fu Manchu. Yeah, he is. He works with MI6, his fellow agent is casually racist. It's all that and more. So when making Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, the modern-day Marvel MCU mechanics looked at this god-awful Orientalist, yellow peril colonialist mess and scrapped it. The only thing they kept is that our beloved Shang is hiding from his father, the leader of an international shadow league of assassins. Of course they kept that, you say, because it's one of our dearest overtired, overused tropes, dudes and dames with daddy issues. Now you'd think that, but part of what makes Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings so great, and it is great, is that instead of being about Dear Evil Dad, what we focus on is a family torn apart by unprocessed grief. Okay, you should now say, then it's the other one, our favorite Hollywood melodrama menace, the family in jeopardy. But like a Tai Chi master, Shang-Chi again deftly sidesteps boring cliche, because in that trope the family is more important than anything, and disparate members must refine their love for each other and reform the family unit. Happily, Ten Rings does not give us such simpering simplicity. Rather, it uses this family to show that either societal pressures or personal shames and fears keep us from accepting both the positive and negative sides of our histories, and thus of who we are. Until we accept those sides, we cannot progress in life. And I can see a little Chinese dualism here, balancing yin and yang, but also, this theme from Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings seems tailor-made to speak to America's struggles right now. And yes, the bus fight, and yes, the scaffold fight, and yes, the lovers fight, and the MCU cameos and karaoke and Awkwafina and Tony Leung, and when we finish our journey, may we all have magical kung fu goddess Michelle Yeoh to welcome us home. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Shayla Farzan. Many plants and animals use temperature and other environmental cues like a calendar, letting them know when it's time to bloom or find a mate. But climate change is disrupting these natural rhythms worldwide, from songbird migration across North America to plankton growth cycles in Norway to a hillside of wildflowers in Missouri.
So if we head on out, you can notice there are a number of different species that have popped up. Dwarf-crested iris, blue phlox, Canadian woodbedony.
Matthew Austin is a postdoctoral researcher with the Living Earth Collaborative at Washington University. This patch of forest, about 40 miles west of St. Louis, is covered with native wildflowers throughout the spring and summer. But the timing of when they bloom has changed in recent decades, Austin says.
We see that a warming climate is not only causing flowers to bloom earlier, in many species it's also causing them to end flowering later.
Missouri wildflowers are blooming up to a week longer than they used to, compared to data collected in the 1930s and 40s. And that's created a late summer pileup of species flowering all at once. Meanwhile, bumblebees and other pollinators are flitting from species to species, says Nicole Miller-Strutman, a biologist at Webster University.
When a pollinator makes a decision about who it's going to visit, that influences the pollen that they're carrying on their body. And flowers, not too surprisingly, don't really want pollen from another plant species.
A flower that gets pollen from the wrong species may not be able to reproduce, or it could push some to self-pollinate, an extreme form of inbreeding. To understand how this might affect reproduction, Matthew Austin has been pollinating hundreds of Missouri wildflowers by hand this year. Some experimental flowers get pollen from their own species. Others get pollen from different plant species to simulate what's happening now, as climate change causes that pileup of species blooming at the same time. To keep pollinators from visiting his flowers, he slips sheer mesh bags over the buds before they open. But just as he removes the bag to tap pollen onto the flower's sticky stigma, a tiny bee lands on it.
And oh no. Well, a pollinator got on this one while I had it unbagged. They're sneaky. So, this will not be included in my study, but thankfully there's another one right here.
He moves on to the next flower, a human meticulously doing the work of a bee. It's a slow process, but Austin hopes the results will help us understand how climate change is reshaping this complicated ecosystem. For Scientific American's 60 Second Science, I'm Shayla Farzan.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey, kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day 350,000 GM workers kicked off a 67-day strike. It was the largest auto strike since the end of World War II. According to historian Jefferson Cowie, it was likely the costliest. In his book, Staying Alive, Cowie notes that the strike cost GM $1 billion in profits and nearly bankrupted the union. But he adds it, quote, lacked the proletarian drama that fired journalists' hearts. For Cowie, it was an example of labor management cooperation, a civilized affair. But historian Jeremy Breacher points out that the Wall Street Journal drew different conclusions about the strike at the time. In a series of articles, the paper noted that labor management cooperation during the strike served ironically to get workers back to work. A long and costly strike served a number of functions. It wore down strikers' expectations. After 8 or 10 weeks, workers would be amiable to terms they initially rejected. It also provided an escape valve for built-up frustration over working conditions. And a long strike served to coalesce internal union factions around a common enemy, strengthening the union's leadership in the process. For management, a long and costly strike lent hope that workers would be reluctant to strike in the future. But Breacher notes these ideas about workers' motives nearly backfired. Strikers simply wouldn't budge on their demands. They made gains in wages, pensions, and cost of living allowances. And they were finally able to retire after 30 years. But critics argued the agreement fell short of initial demands, and workers lacked more say in the workplace. This would be a key issue in the many strikes and wildcats in the years to come. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 83 degrees. And we will be sunny throughout the day with winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. A few passing clouds tonight with lows in the, low 50s, upper 40s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And sunny skies tomorrow with highs only around 82. Winds will be light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to spike. We now stand at 203,050 people confirmed with coronavirus, and our deceased have once again gone up, and we now stand at 240 dead. Because they won't wear masks, they won't vaccinate, and they mock everybody who does. Well, ragweed pollen is rated moderate right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 43 parts per million, and that's good because, wildfire smoke sucks. And the daytime UV index is high at 6. Barometric pressure is rising at 30 inches, visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 78%. I should add that we have a forecast for rain on the weekend that looks like it might bring over an inch for Saturday and Sunday. We can only hope. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that crowdsources from around the world. London is 66 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 68 and cloudy. Rome is 83 and sunny. Kyiv is 67 and fair. Kabul is 70 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 83 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 71 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 53 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Daria Litvinova of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russian President Vladimir Putin entered self-isolation after people in his inner circle became infected with the coronavirus, the Kremlin said yesterday, Tuesday, adding that the leader himself tested negative for COVID-19. Putin, who is fully vaccinated with Russia's Sputnik 5, or is it Sputnik V? Anyway, he thinks that he's fully vaccinated with that, so it must be okay. And he held several public engagements indoors on Monday and even said that he may have to quarantine soon. An aide at the time sought to suggest he was speaking generally and insisted Tuesday that no one's health was endangered. Yes. During a video conference with government officials and members of the ruling United Russia Party, Putin said that several people in his immediate circle were infected with the virus, including a staff member who he was in close contact with throughout Monday. That staffer was vaccinated and recently got revaccinated, Putin said, apparently referring to a third shot that Russia is offering people who were immunized more than 6 months ago. 3 days after revaccination, he fell ill, Putin said. We will see how Sputnik 5 really works.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Derek Gatopoulos and Lori Kellerman of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Authorities in Greece opened an investigation into the crash of a private plane from Israel that killed a prosecution witness in the corruption trial of former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Haim Geron, a former senior official at Israel's Ministry of Communications, and his wife Esther were killed in a crash late Monday off the island of Samos. The Israeli Foreign Ministry identified the victims, both age 69, adding that consular officials and the ministry were working with the family to return the bodies. Geron was one of more than 300 witnesses that prosecutors listed for Netanyahu's trial on corruption charges. He is on trial for allegedly accepting expensive gifts from wealthy associates. Netanyahu, now the opposition leader in Israel's parliament, has denied all the accusations and mocked the size of the witness list. The single-engine Cessna 182 took off from Haifa, Israel, and crashed near Samos Airport. Shortly before landing, communication with the control tower on Samos was lost, and the Civil Aviation Authority informed the Search and Rescue Center about the loss of communication, the authority said in a statement. The bodies of the two Israeli occupants were recovered by the Coast Guard several hours later with the help of divers. Fishing boats, as well as vessels from the European Union's Border Protection Agency, joined Greek Coast Guard vessels in the recovery effort. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and that intrigue will only become more intriguing as time goes on. And we will meet up tomorrow, of course, for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon of tea.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.